Beautiful intro to Free the Hounds podcast, Talking Couch Potatoes. Welcome to episode 6, everyone. I hope you all listened to episode 5, which was my favourite episode of all. Shout out to Hannah and Emily, and of course Mel, who I have to sadly say is not with us today. Mel is taking a tiny little break. I believe she's over in Lithuania building a puppy orphanage. She's building it by hand all by herself. That's what she does when she takes a break. Gemma, our producer, is going to step in a little bit to help us out today. Hi, Gemma.
Hello, Matthew.
And we also have, I guess, well-known to Free the Hounds guest co-host, Alan Dolphin. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Matt. Hi, Gemma. Good
Hi,
to be
Alan.
here.
It's good to have you here.
Big boots to fill after the likes of Georgie Purcell and young Hannah. The last one, so a bit nervous, but we'll see how we go.
I think we'll do fine. And Alan Dolphin, Alan got into Free the Hounds because he wanted some porpoise in his life. Crickets. So I couldn't resist. So we've got a pretty interesting podcast this week. But for now, do we have any listener feedback, Gem?
Nothing this week. However, we did have a wonderful time at the Pride WA Fair Day, and I will let Alan speak all about that.
Yep. It's the first time we've done the event with Pride WA, and it was a marvellous day. And part of the event is a dog show, and it's hosted by John Carey, the Labor MP over here in Perth. And one of the categories is Best Rescue.
Who won, Alan?
My beautiful hound, Indy, got the Best Rescue. So bottle of wine and a few doggy toys, but it was a brilliant day.
Lovely. Thanks, Alan. And shout out to Alan as well, because I've been to a few things, and Alan's usually the first there and the last to leave, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, he works very, very hard.
Yeah, I'm lucky because that one Sunday, that's my working week. I'm happily retired. Like most of our volunteers, they do that, and the next day do the full-time job. So really what I do is very, very minimal.
Right. I think I might disagree with that, because I think you put a week's worth of work in
into
on
the
Sunday.
one day.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Thanks,
And
Alan.
Indy as well. Indy is usually there all day.
I've met Indy. She's gorgeous.
She's absolutely beautiful.
She's the second most gorgeous female greyhound I know of. Hi, Bunny. All right, ladies and gents, and everyone in between. Please listen, rate, and share for Free the Hounds, Talking Couch Potatoes. Just want to let our listeners know that you are not just part of a beautiful local WA advocacy group. You are part of a global community now. We are listened to in 9 different countries.
Wow.
It's a global community. And if you have any feedback from the US, the UK, Indonesia, Ireland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, I might have made that bit up, please email us at podcast@freethehounds.com.au. It's time for some shout-outs and promos.
Yes.
What's going on?
So on Friday the 1st of December, Free the Hounds is having their annual tin shake in Perth City. And I believe everybody stands out on the Murray Street Pedestrian Mall out the front of the underground train station. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. From about 7:30 on the Friday morning, meet outside the entry exit to the railway station, the underground railway station, Murray Street Mall. It's usually a great morning.
And there'll be hounds.
Yep, definitely.
They'll be available for pats and cuddles. And also, do we have FPOS available as well?
Yep, we'll have FPOS availability there.
Fantastic.
So come on down and support Free the Hounds, Tin Shake, Perth City.
There's also Frisk Small Bar in Northbridge donating $2 from every Ricky Bobby cocktail sold to Greyhound Adoptions WA. Western Australia, I should say. But yes, for the month of November, you got to get out there quick.
And what's in a Ricky Bobby?
Oh, I think there's something strawberry and mint, and I know there's blueberries.
And gin. I suppose. Tasty little cocktail, and that's coming from a confirmed beer drinker.
So if Alan is willing to endorse a cocktail, it must be good, right? So a big shout out to our friends at Frisk Small Bar in Northbridge. This week with Millaway building a greyhound shrine in Tibet. We've got Alan, who's going to help us out with stats.
As you say, Matt, this is the real difficult part of what we do in advocacy. So we'll go back to the fortnight ending on the 19th of October. 1 dog was euthanised on the track. 5 dogs were put on 90-day stand down, and this usually typifies a fractured hock. And another interesting statistic in them injuries is 35 injured off track, because these injuries are not recorded by racing and wagering.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with racing and wagering. In their injury statistics, they don't get updated. So a dog can be stood down for 4 days from a minor injury, but then when it gets back to the kennels and the next day, it plays up a bit more and it's stood down for 30 days, and that does not get updated. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got trainer subsidies of $99,860. You've got stake money of $661,482, and breeding bonuses of $50,400 for a total payout of $811,742.
Wow.
So you sort of see where, when they talk welfare, whose welfare are they prioritising?
I don't think it's the beautiful creatures' welfare.
It's incredible because a lot of that money is tax-free because of hobbyists.
That's correct. And like 1% of the prize money goes to the actual animal welfare.
We have a very special guest, veterinary professor of animal welfare, Andrew Knight, coming up with quite an extended interview this time. He gave us quite a bit of time, and he also has an extraordinary amount of knowledge, has done an extraordinary amount of research in an extraordinary amount of fields related to animal welfare. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming up, and in fact, we are going to have to extend this podcast over 2 parts just to contain it all. Please listen, please stay tuned, and here we go. All right. So as I mentioned, we have a very esteemed guest with us today. We have Mr. Andrew Knight, who is a veterinary professor of animal welfare. Andrew attended Murdoch Uni, but because he was a failure at surfing, he had to leave the country and went over to the UK. Before he left, he helped the attempts to end the live sheep trade in the 90s, practiced veterinary medicine around London until 2012, taught at Ross University in the Caribbean. He's, as I said, now a veterinary professor of animal welfare with Griffith University, established and directed the Centre for Animal Welfare at the University of Winchester in the UK. There is so much more. He has been honoured with 14 awards, 22 research grants. He has written many books, including the Routledge Handbook of Animal Welfare. His website is www.andrewknight.info. You can find much more about him there, and we are very blessed to have him with us on our podcast here in WA. Thank you, Andrew, for being here.
Thank you, Matt. Can I thank you kindly for all that, but object to the characterisation of being a failed surfer. I could never afford a surfboard, and I never learned how to stand up on a board, but I was a really good body surfer back when I was a student, actually.
Well, I think we have something in common. I gave board surfing a go, it failed at that. I can body surf okay, I guess.
You and me both.
I didn't move on to quite the heights of advocacy and achievement that you have. And really...
Possibly you didn't fail surfing as badly as I did.
Andrew, I'm so happy to have you here. And I know that you've actually done a bit of a dive also into greyhounds specifically. There's an advocacy group in the UK called Great Exploitations. I believe they commissioned you to do a study on injuries in racing greyhounds in 2018.
Yeah, so they approached me to ask if I could do a report into factors causing injuries in racing greyhounds. So I spent some time finding every bit of published research, PhD theses that existed in the scientific literature at that time, and popped it into a report, which generated great interest when it came out. It identified the main causes of injuries in racing greyhounds and highlighted how common this was and how many dogs were being injured. And killed and also mysteriously disappearing before they even made the racing grade within the industry. So I presented that at a parliamentary event in the United Kingdom and was also able to present that to the government special advisor. So, interested listeners can find that report and my others on my website that you've kindly provided, which is andrewknight.info.
So what is the state of sort of greyhound racing in the UK as compared to Australia, do you think, Andrew?
I understand it's in the East Coast, there are racing tracks which are getting rid of the curves and there is racing in a straight line occurring. Am I right about that?
Yeah, Andrew, I think there's a couple of tracks where they've introduced straight racing, but it's not very popular because there's no enjoyment in watching a dog run in a straight line.
That's what I was told, that there are these straight tracks. And if so, then that would actually be a significant advance of Australia over the UK. But as you say, it's not taking off very well in the eastern states. So, for it to be a really significant advance, the whole country would have to change and it would have to be something that is going to be sustained. But it is good to hear that there are a couple of straight tracks because curvature of the tracks is clearly one of the top causes of injury in racing greyhounds as they approach those bends. They create zones of congestion. Greyhounds running in front of one another as they try to take the curve or else slowing down so they can take the curve and the dogs behind running into them. And we know that these zones of congestion, as the greyhounds go around bends, are responsible for about 80% of most serious and catastrophic injuries.
Wow.
Yeah, so, there are so many problematic areas associated with greyhound racing that it clearly should simply be ended. But if you were going to try to reform it, the top of the list would be to switch from curved tracks to straight tracks. Certainly not the only thing. There's a number of other things that would be a good idea as well. So it is encouraging to hear that these baby steps have been taken in that direction in the industry in the eastern states of Australia. But it's a long way, I think, from being able to say that it's a major step forward for the welfare of racing greyhounds in Australia.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm glad you brought that idea up of harm minimisation. I know that the report you suggested, things like straight tracks, shorter races, optimised surfaces, improved starting box design, positioning, delayed box opening, improved veterinary facilities and services. And I agree 100% that if we're going to do something, let's make it as safe as we can. I guess that there really is no safe way to race these gorgeous creatures. We think about things like off-track injuries. We can't regulate the trainers who will do whatever they want to do off-track, the living conditions of the greyhounds while they're in training, the overbreeding. Obviously do the best we can while it's happening, but ultimately that we might want to just stop this business altogether.
Yes, and I'm impressed that, as you say, really have spent time going through my website and all the things that could be done to make racing safer for greyhounds. But if a miracle occurred and all of those things occurred across most of the industry, you would still be left with a couple of major problem areas, one of which is, as you pointed out, the kenneling and husbandry and training conditions. And because these are not companion dogs, they're dogs which are being involved in an industrial activity to generate profit. Costs are minimised because a lot of it's marginally profitable anyway, so costs are minimised, so they're kept in very barren, unenriched, it's very simple kennels. When I've been asked to prepare reports about the conditions in the kennels, I've looked at footage and seen areas which are badly maintained, very unhygienic, with waste not being removed quickly enough, sharp surfaces, protuberances, wires, things that indicate neglect and lack of maintenance of the facilities, and which are injury risks to the dogs. We know that they are not taken out and simply walked as much as they should be. They don't receive normal socialisation with people or indeed with other dogs during the sensitive socialisation period when they're growing up, resulting in behavioural problems. And the top cause of death on tracks is certainly injuries, but after all of that, the next biggest cause of death is actually being humanely killed because of behavioural problems. The other thing, by the way, I would say, as a practicing vet, when I would see ex-racing greyhounds, which I did quite often, they always had very bad teeth because very cheap and poor quality diets were used in the kennels, and lack of exercise, socialisation, and the poor conditions of the kenneling. So there is all of that. And then there's also the issue of many more greyhounds are born and then actually go forward into racing, and ones that are considered at an early age not to be likely to run fast enough to generate a profit will mysteriously disappear. It's called wastage, and it's a major percentage of all greyhounds that are actually born. So there's very little transparency about where all those greyhounds go, but it is assumed that most of them are euthanized, unfortunately. In fact, euthanasia is the wrong term. By definition, euthanasia means killing that's not only humanely conducted, but also in the best interests of the animal, which is true if they're severely injured and no prognosis for recovery, for example. But for a young animal that has the prospect of a lifetime in front of it that it could enjoy, it's not euthanasia. It's killing animals possibly humanely, but it's not something that's ethical. So yeah, there's a massive problem with wastage of greyhounds that are not considered to be fast enough to make a profit. And there's the cost minimisation and resulting in very poor conditions in kennels, diets, training regimes, lack of socialisation, preventative healthcare, and so on. And that, of course, would all remain even if a miracle occurred and the tracks were reformed with the long list of recommendations that you read out previously involving straightening the tracks and so on.
I'm really happy to hear you say that, Andrew, because I think a big part of my awakening in terms of animal welfare, particularly greyhounds, I think you mentioned in one of your videos that they're one of the most gentle of the dog breeds. One of my realization was the commodification. You mentioned the word, they're not companions. And I hope that in WA at least, we have a system where we need to rehome now. And so there are more and more greyhounds becoming companions. So I'm hoping that shift, that paradigm shift from seeing greyhounds as commodities into seeing them as we see sort of other dogs will sort of inspire some change. The other word you used was wastage. And I think that points to the perception of greyhounds as commodities. And I think as long as we keep viewing certain animals as commodities, we won't assign them the same rights or respect as we do when we view animals as companions.
I mean, absolutely. We treat our companions as something more than profit-generating objects, and we are emotionally connected to them. We care about them, and we inevitably provide better standards of care for them. Whereas when we're talking about racing animals that are being kept to generate a profit, then they're there for a different purpose. The attitudes and values are different. How they are treated is different. Simply maintaining survival and physical fitness and likelihood to win a race, where a profit is not being generated consistently, then those animals will be discontinued. They'll be taken out and rehomed if they're lucky, or killed if they're not. Sometimes they're donated to places like veterinary schools, where they may join a blood donor colony. They may be used for practicing physical examinations by veterinary students, and then later being killed, actually, again, hopefully humanely killed, but not true euthanasia because it's not in the animal's best interest. So yes, there's a very different attitude, and it results in different behaviours towards them, different fates for these animals as well.
We had, Andrew, last week we spoke to Hannah, who's an 8-year-old Free the Hounds advocate, and Hannah said one of the things she sort of worries about with racing greyhounds is that it destroys their personality due to us using them for our purposes. It does kind of screw with their personality.
Yeah, I mean, with greyhounds, and indeed with all dogs, we want them to become confident, happy, well-behaved individuals, well socialised with other dogs and also with people. And very often when I was practicing, I would see these ex-racing greyhounds come in, and they would invariably be gentle with myself, but quite often not good with other dogs. So they haven't gone through appropriate socialisation. And as I say, behavioural problems are one of the top causes of being killed in greyhound racing. It's basically the second most common cause after physical injury. So it's a real problem. It does result in personalities which are not developed as they should, and it can result in the death of large numbers of these greyhounds as well.
Thank you so much, though, Andrew, for just your wealth of knowledge and doing a deep dive on this. Jem, you had a question for Andrew.
Yeah, So your report, I'm just wondering if any of those recommendations were followed in the UK, if there was any...
Not to my knowledge, unfortunately. There was a meeting at which representatives were there, and they said that they would get in touch with me to take this further, and that never happened. So there has been no move by greyhound racing in the United Kingdom in the recommended direction that I can see, and that would reduce these injury and death risks of racing greyhounds.
Wow.
So to have done all this work,
It's disappointing, but I, to be honest, did not expect any better from the greyhound racing industry. The industry, I don't think, is genuinely interested in the kind of substantial reform that would be necessary to make a significant and sustained impact on reducing injury rates.
we in Australia, Alan, recently did try and improve a track. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened with that?
Yeah, Matt, in Australia, a lot of the track upgrades are based on a report from a study by the University of Technology of Sydney, and most of the track upgrades are based on the recommendations from that report. In Perth, we've got 3 tracks. We've got Caddington Racetrack, which is now recognised as the most lethal track in Australia. So out of 68 racetracks across Australia, we have Northam Track, which was shut down for 2 years during COVID. While it was shut down, they did upgrades on that track. On the opening night, a dog was killed and the meeting was abandoned. And just recently, in the last week, they just completed $6 million worth of upgrades to the Mandurah racetrack. In the first week, we've had 2 fractured hocks. So I'm not really sure how these track upgrades and improvement are reducing greyhound injuries on track.
I think that's the position of Free the Hounds ultimately. We want to educate people. We want to do what we can to support the hounds while this sport is happening. Ultimately, it needs to end. For those of us maybe who don't have the tireless energy that you do, Andrew, but want to make a difference, what's the simplest and best thing you could do in terms of, standing up for particularly animal welfare, but particularly greyhounds?
Certainly for animal welfare, it would be simply going vegan if you're not already. And for greyhounds, obviously not supporting the industry in any way and helping you guys disseminate information. These days, so many people have wide social media networks. There are short summary videos, for example, about welfare problems associated with racing greyhounds. I've got one on my YouTube channel. Disseminating this information is probably the simplest thing that people can do to help the campaigns against greyhound racing, I would think.
Thanks, Andrew, and thank you for providing people with a source of scientifically based, rationally considered information. That's Andrew Knight, everyone, veterinary professor of animal welfare, who has donated a huge portion of his very busy time to us. So what a treat that was. What amazing guests we get on Free the Hounds podcast, Talking Couch Potatoes. A very, very intelligent, principled and active advocate for animals in general, veterinary professor of animal welfare, Andrew Knight. And please listen again next episode where we will have the rest of the interview, because it was quite a long one. He gave us quite a bit of time. So please tune in again for episode 7 of Talking Couch Potatoes. I did miss my buddy Mel. I hope she's doing well, out there. I think she's hunting hunters. She's gone to Africa and she's actually hunting the hunters of animals. It's what she does on her holidays. But a big thank you to Alan for stepping in this week. I think you're going to join us again, Alan, for the second part of this one.
Yeah, I just do what Mel tells me to do. And see.
Thanks to Jem for also taking on some extra duties for this podcast. Please listen, rate, share. Let's all get together so that we can release the hounds